I'm going to be talking about holes. First of all, I would like to call somebody. Just a second. Well, just a minute. Maybe you wanna come?
Sure.
Yeah. So the check's for you. Come.
Up.
And I will ask you to please draw a hole. There.
Draw a hole?
Yeah.
Like any details, like clothes, hard, white.
However you picture it in your mind. Alright. Okay. Now I want to ask you to actually think of you digging a hole. There are many kinds of holes, right? Not digging, making a hole. Just making a hole.
Making a hole?
Yeah, making a hole of any kind. Okay? Try to think of details, materials. So this is a specific hole, okay? So I'm going to ask you, why are you making it? Maybe you can talk to the office.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Just fast answer. Just
why I'm doing this,
yeah.
without telling like what I told it.
Yeah, just the reason why.
The reason why I'm making a hole?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But first of all, you asked me rather than that, like if I would decide to make a hole, maybe. I don't know, it's fun. Like it makes your hands busy, I think.
Okay. Now the question is,
It's fun.
fair enough. The question is, what for?
What for?
Yeah, the same hole. You're doing this, then it's fun for your hands, and what for?
Like, do I have to like put a function for it?
Yeah, purpose.
Purpose would be because it's fun.
Okay, we're done. Thank you. That was it, actually. I was gonna go on and on until she would start repeating herself. But, so this is a game, actually, that my sister, who is a CEO of a very hip software development company, taught me. And it's meant to discover the principles of an action. So, supposedly, yeah, you get to the... There's no more than fun to your home. Okay. There is another game that my sister taught me, in which one has to define intrinsic properties of a thing and its accidents, or aspects that depend on the context or environment, but not on the thing itself. Then you were supposed to mix all of these. Somehow you were supposed to come up with very innovative ideas. It was clear from the beginning that actually this game could not be applied to the notion of whole. Because what is a whole made of? A hole in a wall, for example, is it made of bricks, or is it actually the lack of matter what the hole is really made of? A hole is a void, negative or positive. There are many ways of representing it, but it's a bit funny and interesting to me to think that usually we think about it as something round, for some reason. It could have any shape, right? Before going into this notion of void, which is pretty complex, I'm going to talk a little bit about zero, which also we represent as a round shape. Each math professor or book needs to redefine what she means by zero. Up to this day, there is no consensus about this principle, if it belongs to the natural numbers or not. Zero is always a special case. I studied philosophy, so I'm not going to go into math a lot. I'm going to talk from this perspective. First class in uni, ancient philosophy, the Greeks, obviously. The Greeks are this myth of the origin of Western tradition of philosophy. Please pay attention to this. I didn't say history of philosophy, I said tradition. Tradition is something we build. The Greeks didn't have zero. I think it has to do with an illusion of completeness. The Greeks didn't differentiate between nature and thought, object and subject. These are modern categorizations. They were conceptually one with the universe, as to speak. So the tale goes, the father of philosophy is Socrates. Okay. Greek, Socrates, who, funny enough, didn't write a single word. He was not conscious of being a father of a tradition. He was just doing his own thing. Then came Plato, wrote everything down, and the possibility of arguing was born, hence of winning an argument, of owning the truth. And there are also the pre-Socratics, the grandparents of philosophy. They were not philosophers themselves. They were a sort of naive crowd, curious about the nature of things, but they basically didn't know much. This is what obviously the Greeks said. So a guy named Thales was a pre-Socratic. Thales from Mileto. He was walking in the night, wondering about the stars, and probably the beginning of the universe. He was a great astronomer. He predicted an eclipse, and that was pretty hard back then. Thank you. It is said that he was so distracted by what he saw above that he failed to look to the ground and he fell into a hole. A woman peasant passed by and made fun of him. She pointed out that he might have been a great man who knew a lot about the stars, but what was right below his feet he could not see. The origin is never the first event in a timeline. An event is a fact. It could or could not have happened. It is a sort of accident of history. The origin is an unmotivated principle that casts light on the rest of the events that come after, what allows us to put things in order, to understand them in a certain way. The essence. A principle isn't motivated because there is nothing before that causes it. As we are not dogmatic, we call it consensus nowadays. Here is an anecdote example. One kind of principles are math axioms. Again, I don't know much about this, but anyways. When I was in high school, a guy came and he taught a special class. He was actually practicing, he was still in uni. And he talked about non-Euclidean geometry in the context of philosophy class. It flipped my mind. First of all, what was he doing in a philosophy class? Second of all, geometry, as I thought back then, was a representation of reality. And then it happened to be that there could be two different geometries. And then they were not opposing, they were actually kind of complementary. It didn't mean that one was destroying the other one. So they explain different things, right? Like quantum physics actually responds to non-Euclidean geometry. So going back, Aristotle couldn't think zero. For him, time is linked to movement. One thing is A1 and then it is A2. There is a change, a movement in position in time, space. Time does not exist separately. Things are not in time. Things exist. Then they change. Then we have time. But they couldn't help standing on the pre-Socratic shoulders. This is what I want to point out. And then put them down. We are better than our predecessors, they said. We know, they didn't. But the Greeks needed this act of denial, a background onto which they could see themselves as images. This is the paradigmatic foundational act in the form of the opposition, aka repression. They were not one with the universe after all. There was something else, something put outside or before. To finish, and give me a minute, I want to drop philosophy and talk about something specific. It happens to be that Ingrid asked me to talk about this because I'm digging a hole for the last 4 months. And I plan to keep on doing so for a couple of more months. It's a hole in a beach. I go there once a week. And every time I go, I get questions. People approach me. I don't call them, I'm busy. And they also always happen to be middle-aged men, even when they are with their wives. Women don't speak to women. And this didn't happen once or twice. I mean, it happened at least 12 times, and you'll have to believe me. And they always ask very specific information. They want numbers. They want something to handle in their hands. They ask me for how long I have been digging, how big is it going to be, how deep is my hole. So I perform a sort of reenactment of Bartleby's I'd Rather Not. I'm going to stress one last aspect of this whole thing, because I am the kind of person who goes all the way. One cannot talk about this whole thing without the W, without mentioning the sexual connotation of it. I read a lot about holes lately. I went to a talk about holes. Every time they fail to mention the obvious sexual connotation of the notion of hole, I laugh silently at their cowardice. It seems to be that a hole carves to be filled. But is it the hole? I could count a bit more, but 0 before 1, 0 before 1, and 1 always fails to recognize this. At the same time, we'll always fall into the temptation of going one step back to look for a fundament and to put it as if it was never there. No, as if it has always been there. There is a difference between transcendent and transcendental, and the transcendental. To transcend is to go beyond. This, in my opinion, is the human's basic movement. But the transcendental, strictly speaking, was invented by Kant in modernity. And it names the possibility of deducting a fundament, to go to the principles and make them understandable under the logic of what they motivate. So they are not outside the circle. I'm just going to point out one last thing that is pretty obvious. A hole is something that carves to be filled with something, but in the moment that it's filled, it ceases to exist. The hole is the opposite of the whole, with a W. It is an opening in every wholeness. It is the intrinsic crack in every fundament, the need for transcendence. Yeah.
Did you feel more whole when you were digging a hole?
No. Thank you for the question. But I feel more free. It's a bit corny to say, but it feels good there. It's a big space also. It's not only because of the hole.
I saw you there.
I know you do. Yeah? Something else?
Before I asked you to talk, you sent me a text a while ago that was titled Assholes. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, because I really love that text.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Assholes.
Because you're talking about the sexual part of it, but I don't know, I think
I wanted to mention it, but it was another text, so another 10 minutes. But yeah, okay, I have this image. It's not like it's a fantasy, it's just like a parallel possible universe. Logic in itself. Okay, it has to do with gender. So I tend to think that we separate, right? We put things into one circle, then what's outside is the other thing. So a concept is like this, and then so we have women and we have men. And women have teats and men don't. But how many girls do we know that have almost no teats, you know, and men who actually are? So it's like as if there was a gray zone that we fail to see, only because we need to separate. So what if we, putting genitals aside, which are obviously different and they perform a function that has to do with reproduction, what if we would separate pleasure from reproduction? We would go to a clinic or whatever to make babies. And then pleasure would have to do with identity, which actually always is always the case. So we would identify ourselves and our gender according to the way we acquire pleasure. And it would happen to be that if genitals are not differentiating ourselves, that's a very hard word, we could actually focus more in what actually unites us all, which is our assholes. I'm just saying. Okay, I don't know if there was another question.
Is that what you came up with, digging the hole?
No, that came after.
But you were digging a hole for a long time now already, right?
Yeah.
What did you learn, or did you get like new insights while digging the hole?
If I learned how to dig better? No, because yeah.
That's the practical
about other
side, but
stuff.
I mean, you're digging a hole for a long time, you
Yeah.
start to think.
Well, I started. It's like
Is it kind of, what's the word, therapeutical?
yeah. It's a lot of things for me personally. I'm focusing more on what triggers in people actually, but to me, well, yeah, I came up with the weirdest thoughts of this asshole thing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know where to start, but every time, because it's a very physical activity, I need to rest. So I need to take care of many practical aspects. It's very far away. I have to bring extra t-shirts because I sweat. It's very tiring. I have to be careful that I don't break my back and stuff. So when I rest, I think a lot.
Cool.
But I don't know what to say that I learned. I'm still
Yeah.
investigating. But I like the idea of something repetitive, and people go crazy with that. Like they don't. Why are you doing this? What are
Yeah.
you doing this for?
You know the story of Stalin? What he did to his prisoners?
No.
He would let
Oh,
them.
the thing.
No,
I didn't know.
what he would do is, if you want to crack people, then what he would do is he would let them dig a hole and then fill it up himself.
Oh, I didn't. I heard it was Hitler.
One of these guys.
Yeah, but
Probably both.
how?
Yeah, holes are suggestive.
Is that something you learned
At least.
prison?
Thank you.